Hiya, Jen.
Hi,
Nice to see you.
and you.
I'm good, thank you. Yeah. I was reflecting back on our conversation last week about safety in relationships. And I know that we want to talk today about this principle of collaboration and mutuality. I was thinking about how, if I think about collaboration, I usually think about collaboration with a peer because that's where our minds go. We think, I'll collaborate with a peer, that makes sense. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about collaborating in a way that undoes some power structures. I was
Mm.
thinking if you had any examples of that spring into
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah, the one that comes to mind is I have a 2-year-old, and with 2-year-olds, there's often quite a bit of a power struggle.
Yeah.
And I had this revelation recently of how often it is I am deciding, oh, he'll like to do this. And then
Okay.
I'm rushing us both out the house to go and do the thing that I think that he'll want to do. And then feeling frustrated that he isn't wanting to do the thing that in my mind he wants to do. And it's such fun because if you ask him, he's generally got about 4 people he'll say he wants to go and see, or he wants to go to a cafe that's in town, or he wants to go to a soft play. And I was like, actually, these are all entirely standard things that we do most weeks. We've got membership to a soft play here thing. We can do this quite easily. So we've started now at the point that we pick him up from nursery, and it's only 2 days. So he has like this little golden afternoon after nursery twice a week,
Nice.
and say yes to everything. And this is usually go to that cafe or go to soft play or play diggers at home. Any of those are fun. A couple of weeks ago, he said, see a pig.
I love that. That's why his little mind went to. He wants to see a pig. Oh my goodness.
And as far as I'm aware, like he's seen pigs before, but it's not like we'd seen a pig the day before. But I don't know where this had come from. And I kept going, "Do you mean a guinea pig?" Because there's a farm we go to that has guinea pigs. And he said,
Right.
"No, see pig, see pig." And I'm like, where on earth am I going to find a pig?" And I was like, "I'm kind of committed to this sort of okay." We'll follow his lead. And nursery are very big on it's all child led. So he eats lunch whenever he wants to. He sleeps whenever he wants to. Sleeps for as long as he wants to. This kind of thing. They're very, very good on this. So I was like, okay, all right. He wants to see a pig. And I didn't feel like I'm going like enabling something in him. It felt like me going,
Yeah.
all right, let's see if we can make this work. And there's a farm not too far away, like a farm shop cafe type place that we
Okay.
don't go to particularly often. But I was like, I bet that's the kind of place that's got pigs. And there was. But best of all,
Yes.
there was a small pig just running around. So
No
running around the
way.
play area, running around the cafe. And for him, this was
Bizarre.
obviously like his best day ever. He was like, this is amazing. I get to play with this pig and with mum. And I obviously have all these voices in my head of like, I don't know how close you should get to this pig. I don't know
Mm.
like how safe this is. And at one point the pig is then trying to like chew the changing bag and this kind of thing.
Oh my
And
word.
he's wanting to like give the pig his snacks. And I was like, I'm gonna have to do a no to this one just because of the pig's welfare. I don't know what the pig can tolerate. But I'm super happy if you want to roll a football down the slide and get the pig to run around and chase it. Again, that's wild. I would say yes to this because there are so many times that I'm being like, actually, I'm the adult. I know what the timing scale is. Toddlers are kind of like, it's now or it's not happening,
Yeah.
basically. So for me to say we're going to do that tomorrow, he's like, tomorrow doesn't exist to me. But
No.
that kind of like, actually, it was brilliant for us to have this almost collaboration of, okay, well, what are
Yeah.
we going to do? What are we going to do? We're going to go and find a pig. All right,
That's
let's do
amazing.
this. And the other one that's gone alongside this
Wow.
is we've had to work really hard to respect his no because
Mm.
I know he'll have a lovely time at soft play. But if he
Mm.
says, no, I don't want to go to soft play, I'm not going to make him just because it makes the afternoon easier for me or because I imagine he will enjoy it when he's there. I
Yeah.
have to trust there will be other opportunities. At the moment, he's got a pig in his mind and he'll end up having a rubbish time at soft play if I make him go there just because I'm the adult driving the car and because it's mildly inconvenient to try and find a pig. But actually, we both had this really beautiful time just being led by what he wanted with this pig, playing with this pig, running around, having this gorgeous afternoon with this pig. And it
I
really
love
helped me go, all right, let's let's get rid of some of this power that I feel like I hold.
I love that so much because what I'm noticing is that you found some things out about your boy that you just wouldn't have known. Like, had you not had that question, like, what do you want to do? Rather than, like, Mummy's got this fantastic schedule she's put together for the afternoon, which feels like a very obvious thing to do. Like, but because you were like, what do you want to do? You found out that your little boy has been thinking about seeing a pig. And, like, what? I mean, that's spectacular.
Yep. Unexpected, but
Yeah.
yeah.
And then you actually go and have an adventure where he actually gets to run around with a pig, which feels like incredibly fortunate. I just can't even imagine finding a place where there's a pig running around the playground, but there
Yep.
you go. And then you've
Yeah,
just had
it,
this
it,
wonderful
it felt
experience.
unexpectedly beautiful to give him that power and for us to be able to follow through with it.
And I think there's often nervousness, isn't there, in this idea of like or mutuality with the child, because people mishear it as like, I'm going to let the child do whatever they want, and there's not going to be any boundaries. There's not going to be any, I'm never going to say no. But that's not what you're saying. Like, you're not saying he can do anything. Like, if he wants to give his packed lunch to the pig, you'll say yes. If he wants to let the pig eat the bag, you'll say, it's not that there's no boundaries, it's a sharing of power.
Yeah.
You're still the adult, you're still responsible, you're still the mum. You're not saying you and me are, we have the same everything, we have the same responsibility. You're still driving the car.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm
You're
still
still
saying
doing,
go for a wee now, please, that kind of thing.
yeah,
All like the parenting stuff.
yeah. But in terms of where it's possible for him to be heard, to make a choice, and for you to join together to make something happen, that you're making space for that. And I think that deepens something, doesn't it? Because you're treating him as a 2-year-old who can't have an imagination or can't have ideas, but you're treating him as a person who's to be discovered, not to be held or contained. Like 2-year-olds go to soft play and they read books. Like they have books read to them.
Yeah,
You're saying, I'm treating you as a person with who's got a capacity to have wonderful ideas, and therefore we both have
yep.
wonderful experiences.
But there's such a cost, isn't there, of considering the other person as a person?
There is.
Because if I take him to soft play, I've got an idea of this is what soft play is going to look like. And
Yeah.
generally, he doesn't want to do soft play. He just wants to sit in one of those ride on Bob the Builders and pretend that he's Bob the Builder for the whole time. We don't put money in it, he just sits in it. But I can predict that that's going to happen. Might get
Right.
on the slide at the very end. I can see this.
Yeah.
And I can choose whether I'm going to be frustrated that he's not doing soft play, he's just sitting in Bob the Builder, or I can choose to just roll with that. But I've got this kind of idea of my afternoon is going to look like this. It's going to be easy for me. It's going to be straightforward. It's going to be perfect. Really, I can just imagine it all. Whereas there is such a risk at collaborating
Yeah.
with somebody because you
Yeah.
don't know where they're going to go. You don't know what that mutuality is going to look like and what's going to be the loss to you to consider that other person as a person rather than just somebody who fits into my plans.
Yeah. Yeah. So if we think about what we mean when we say collaboration mutuality, what the opposite end of the spectrum is, or what you have to give up to enable that to happen is really power and control, isn't it? And I think collaboration mutuality, everyone's like, yeah, collaboration sounds great. But when you think that you have to forego power and control in order to enter into collaboration and mutuality, then that starts feeling like, I don't know, is that what I want to do? Particularly with the sort of in the setting that we're thinking about, which is with young people, often with no verbal communication, often with, who will present in unusual ways to communicate what it is that they need, or when they don't feel safe, will express that physically towards themselves or others. It feels like the quickest, the easiest thing to do in that circumstance is to assert power and control. But the relational And the trauma-informed thing to do is to find a way into collaboration and mutuality. And I also for that, so one of the really interesting things about trauma-informed care is the undoing of power structures. Not the undoing of rank. You
Yep.
still need a CEO, you still need managers, you still need administrators, you need there to be accountability and authority, but the undoing of power within that. And that's again, that's costly that managers would listen and would stop and would consider the experiences of those who are doing the direct work. I was thinking about like the contrasting ways that power and control plays out as opposed to mutuality and collaboration and the result of that. And I think one of the most intense experiences I had in the US was I went to a specialist hospital where they have a very well-known unit where they take young people with learning disabilities and autism who have exhausted the resources of either their family or this service provider, the school or the care home where they are, either because of the level of the way that they're presenting towards others in a way that puts others at risk, or because of the levels of self-injury that they're performing. I've been following their work for years because they've produced such a lot of resources and understanding around self-injury. So I was really fascinated to meet the team. They were lovely people doing lovely work. But it's a medical unit with a very medicalized understanding and a medicalized approach. I got to go into this unit that I heard so much about, and I was really absolutely, I found it was wonderful that they opened the doors, really, and I have a lot of respect for their work. But the experience was very much about creating a highly controlled environment into which young people who had felt spectacularly out of control could come into.
Mhm.
I remember walking in the door, and as the door sort of clunked behind me, because it's all very locked down, a couple of things happened. Firstly, you see how clinical the environment is. And I think one of the first things I saw was like there's crash mats on the walls. So they're on hooks, you can just pull them off, need them for whatever reason. And then there was just so many people, like a sea of staff and adults. And I saw a young person, like a young boy, probably primary school age, coming down the corridor, and he had three staff,
Mhm.
one either side and one behind, and all of them were wearing body armor. So they're wearing, yeah, so like pads on all of the limbs. They're wearing like a protective, like a breastplate. I don't know how else to say it, and a helmet with a grid, like with a grill, like you would wear for American football. So they're absolutely. So there's this kid, like he's not much higher than my waist,
Yep.
and he's surrounded by these three young people in full body armor. And at that point, I think I had two very strong experiences in quick succession. One is fear, because you think, what on earth am I coming into where an 8-year-old boy needs three adults in body armor? And then secondarily, I remember feeling like, whoomph, like that I am so safe here. A bomb could go off and I would be fine because they have so much equipment and so many people and so much, like they're ready for anything. Like somebody could spontaneously combust and they would have it. So I felt like, and then almost like physically, I felt like somebody had almost like grabbed me around the waist and gone boom, like almost put me in body armor, like because of the strength of the control in the environment.
And did it feel safe or did it feel somebody is in control?
It did feel safe, but in a particular way. It felt safe because the signs were that I wasn't safe, and the signs were that there was literally enough physical strength to hold that. Like, so I was, we said like in the last episode, you don't notice when you feel safe. Well, I did notice that I felt safe because I knew that I was in a dangerous place where I guess it's be like a little bit like going into a war zone, but you go in with a full army
Mhm.
battalion. You know you're not safe, but you know you're safe because there's this amount. It's physical safety, isn't it? It's
Mhm.
not emotional or psychological or relational safety. It's it's like strength that has been wrapped around something
Yeah.
that's acknowledged to be dangerous. So it was a very intense experience. And they certainly make progress they make progress with these young people because they
Mm.
put them into a highly, almost like a laboratory environment, very highly controlled environment. And then they use sort of ABA techniques to sort of teach them different ways of responding. But I think they were not able to track what happened when the young person left the unit very consistently.
Mhm.
And there was an acknowledgement that it's difficult to know whether any of this transfers because it's an environmental change. And we used to say, my previous work, we used to say there's two levels of change that happen with a young person. There's an environmental change where they learn to respond to an environment differently. And you can see remarkable progress happening through environmental change. But you don't know whether they have internalized that experience until they move into another environment. And if they immediately regress back to, all of the things that they were struggling with before they came into our care, then what you know is that they learnt to respond to an environment, but nothing changed inside them. It was an external change, it wasn't an internal change. We always used to say, like, we're going after an internal change. An internal change requires relationship. So I was
So what's
thinking
the
about,
alternative, do you think? What's the
so
alternative?
I think I remember a young lady that I worked with for a lot of years, and she probably could have warranted going into this
Yeah.
into this unit. Like she was very intimidating. She was only little. She had some sensory loss, learning disabilities, autism, nonverbal, and very, very frightened. She found the world very, very scary. Some of that was the things that had happened to her. Some of that was the body that she was in, that she was continually experiencing sensory overwhelm, continually struggling to make sense of the world around her. And she largely dealt with her instinctive response to fear was fight. So she was a fighter, and she would go into fight mode, and she just didn't care if she was in fight mode. She didn't care what damage she did. And so she had done damage to people. She'd really hurt them. And yeah, she could be very scary to be around. We talked before, didn't we, about young people who have such overwhelming internal experiences of fear that it projects into the space. We always used to talk as a team about the fact that you could walk around the corridor to her bedroom and get to the threshold and feel frightened because there was so much fear coming off of her. And sometimes she'd just be lying in a bed, just wrapped in a duvet, and you would feel the fear as you went into that space where she was because it was so overwhelming for her. And so yeah, I guess the temptation in those situations, isn't it, is to take that approach and to start to power up and to look for ways to control her. And I'm not saying that we didn't sometimes fall into that, because it is tempting. But one of the things that we really worked on with her was this idea of her own internal experience, what was happening in her body, and how she herself could learn to some self-control around it. So acknowledging how scary the world was and how scary. So it was very scary for her to so we walked from the home to the school, and it wasn't far, but there was all sorts of unpredictable noises that she couldn't manage. So there's the sound of other children going to and from school. Maybe they weren't having a good day. And there was also a lot of trolleys would get pulled up and down the path, with people transporting, like maintenance and housekeeping, transporting all sorts of things. They were really loud. And so we noticed that this would, like, you could feel her tensing when she would hear that. So we worked with the wider team, the maintenance and the housekeeping team, and just said, look, if you see her walking to school, could you just stop? Like, just stop till she's out of earshot. And so that was really, really helpful for her. But then we worked on this principle where we would have a staff member either side who would just hold her hand so she felt like she had people with her. And I think we also used to just put a hand on her shoulder so she felt like she had people that had got her. And one of the things we would say as we were walking with her was like, we can see that. So I often used to say to her, I can see that you're feeling tense. I can feel it in your body. You've got this. Hold it. Just hold it till you get to your bedroom. Just hold it in, hold it in, hold it, hold. And you could feel her sometimes like holding the feeling of lost safety, holding the desire to explode upwards with a sense of threat that she felt from the world. And I think learning to acknowledge that with her and saying, I can see that you're struggling with that, but we're trusting you, hold it. And then when she would get back to her room, she knew the route, and she would when she got back to her room, we would immediately let go and she would explode at that point. And I remember thinking about if, if she exploded in a, on the street or in a corridor, it was like a bomb going off. But if she exploded in a room, it was like fireworks, and
Mm.
it was pretty beautiful. And so we'd set up her room so she had a lot of things, soft things that she could throw around. She had a mattress and a bed base that was like almost like sort of soft play, and that she was very strong. So I couldn't lift them, but she could lift them. And then she just had, so it was, if something wasn't soft, then it was essentially like fixed into the wall. But she had a lot of soft things, and she would just spend sometimes an hour just throwing these things around the room. And we would often put music on, like some sort of loud, upbeat music. And we used to call it Pickford's because it was like furniture removal. She would basically she would move all the furniture around her room, and it was
Oh,
really heavy work. So it was she, and it was essentially what she'd learnt to do was to take the fight response and to take it out on her safe place, on her in her room where she could fight her teddies. And she had an enormous teddy the same size as her and lots of soft things, and she could take all of her fight feelings out in a safe place, which meant that she protected her relationships. She protected her objects, the attachment figures, and she protected herself from feeling like she was exploding in a place she didn't understand. And I think learning to work with her, to collaborate with her, and to almost like, rather than we as a team will pit ourselves against this young lady, it was like us and her, we pitted ourselves against the fear.
yeah.
And we formed a
Mm.
collaborative network against the fear that was raging inside of her. And that, yeah, I mean, it's all the things really, funnily enough, that you said in terms of your first story about going to going to see a pig.
Yeah.
It's unpredictable. You don't know what's going to happen. There's all sorts of things that you can't foresee. And so it did feel all of those things. It felt like she work with us. Well, like, can she do this? Will she collaborate with us? But as we worked through that and respected her, all the things that she was bringing, and that wasn't primarily because she was autistic or had a learning disability, but because she was processing a great deal of fear from her life, and that we could work with her around that. She had an internal change that happened, and actually, I was part of her moving into a home as when she became an adult, trying to avoid using the word transition, which is a horrible word we only use for people with learning disabilities. So when she, found a new home as an adult and stopped going to school, she did transfer those skills, and she transferred that internal strength, that same model. They took on the same model of her finding when she trying to notice when she needed to let go of the fear and doing it in a safe place. And even like where she moved into, the physical space that she moved into, we made sure that could accommodate that way of managing her trauma experiences.
The word that comes to mind is attunement. Just
Yeah.
that you and your team were attuned with her.
Yeah.
You were attuned with yourself. You were able to recognize what was happening for her and also own your part in it. Whereas a team who have protected themselves with a lot of body armor are not attuned to what's happening with that young person.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that happens in these moments of mutuality is the relationship becomes really deep. But so that young lady, she changed me. That was years ago, but I still remember her, still feel the love that I had for her and the strength of relationship that we developed over that time. And we did develop, and that sense of mutual safety where I began to trust her with to being sort of physically closer to me. And yeah, and we had a bit of even to the thing, like, I remember there were times when, maybe I thought that I could push things a little bit further with her because I knew that we had a strength of relationship, and she would just give me a warning shot, like rather than like exploding on me. You could see that she would just be like, no. I'd be like, oh, okay,
Sure,
that's
sure,
bad,
okay.
I'm off.
Bat away that one.
Thanks for the warning. So yeah, I think that's the beauty, isn't it? Of if you control a person, your experience becomes of your own control, and you really don't learn anything about them. They don't impact your life apart from pushing usually against the control that you've erected against them. But where there's mutuality and collaboration, there's risk, there's mutual risk. And that's what we rather than risk assessing her as some kind of threat to the world, we managed the risk together and try to negotiate that. And the upshot was this relationship that has been so valuable really for me in my life. And that's really different. But also like she got to take something on with her. She got to take on a she built a sense of esteem, self-esteem. She built a sense of value. She also applied this skill, and she could judge when she was in situations where she really needed to, where she really needed to dig deep. So I remember um, there was an event where there was like, like a fancy speaker, and there was about 100 people in the
Yeah.
room, and it was fancy. It's the sort of thing that we just wouldn't normally take her to because it's just not manageable for her, even from a sensory perspective. But I told her about it, and I remember saying, we can go if you like. It will be very overwhelming, be a big room, hundreds of people. If you want to go, we can try it. And I said, you need to get dressed up if so. So I remember she spent about half an hour like fireworking around the room, just exploding everywhere. And then she sat on, I remember I was outside and I was like, if you want to go, you need to, that's fine to do that, but you will need to calm down. And then she sat on a bed and we put a fancy outfit on and we actually put makeup on it. It felt like we were sort of covering up all the rage. And I said, well, if you want to go, that's fine. You can take my hand and we'll go over because it was like over in the school we could walk. So we walked over together and I got a chair and sat her outside in the corridor so she could listen to the sounds inside. And then I said, if you want to go and sit in the hall, you can. And so she stood up, she reached her hand out, and we went in together and sat down in the hall. And then the guest speaker that was there, he was being presented with a gift. And one of the other young men that I caring for, he was supposed to do it. And then he got really silly and just couldn't do it. And this girl, like I'd been saying to her, you need to control, like just keep a hold of yourself, breathe deeply. So I remember she'd sat with her arms and her legs stretched out in front of her, completely taut with the effort of holding herself in. And she'd been going, I was like, you are holding it, but you are working so hard. I was like, you're doing great. You're doing like, just keep holding it. When you've had enough, stand up and we'll leave. And then I realized this boy wasn't going to present this gift to this speaker. And I said, we'll do it. And even as I said it, I was like, what have I done? So I said to this girl, would you like to go and present this gift? And she stood up and I could feel her like taut, like straight as a board. And I put it in her hand and we went up to the front and they wanted photos and all the rest of it. And she thrust this thing at him and he took it and posed for the photo. And I had the photo on my desk for a really long time afterwards because he was smiling and posing. I was trying to look relaxed, but she was like, everything about her was taut and her expression was like, because she was just doing all this deep breathing to to try and control herself. And the thing I'll never forget about that was when she got off the stage, she didn't want to leave. I said, right, you've done great, but we're going back now because I know you're overwhelmed. And she didn't want to leave. And she started pulling me all around the room. And I was like, oh no, what is going on? I don't understand. But I went with it. And eventually she found like the top manager of the organization. And she stopped and the boss, the top boss, she said, well done. I'm so proud of you that you did that. And as soon as she got that accolade, that praise, she took my hand and we went back to her.
Wow, she knew exactly
Yeah.
what she needed.
Yeah, she knew she'd done well and she knew she needed some praise from the top boss. But that was the result, like that level of like achievement was the result of this long process of mutuality and collaboration where we work together against the fear rather than against the person so that she learned how to control it and she learned how to read situations and her own body and how to manage those things with us rather than us working against against
Yeah.
her as if she were the problem.
Well,
Oh,
it
I haven't
feels so
told that story
exciting,
to
doesn't
you.
it, to hear about like the possibilities and hear about how there may be lots of people going to one particular project and it's
Yeah,
very well renowned, and yet there is also another response that comes from that place of
yeah,
the
absolutely. That
trauma
becomes
and the fear.
doesn't become about controlling and managing the person, but becomes about that person working with those around them to manage their own difficult experiences.
I'm looking forward to what we're going to talk about next.
Yeah,
So, Rev,
yeah. It's nice to tell those stories as well. Yeah, great. Thanks, Jen.
next week.
See you next week.